This presentation uses redundant audio and video for the benefit of all, including the blind or deaf. In this segment, there are two parts. Part 1, source orientation and source balance, and Part 2, another tip regarding source orientation. Source orientation is previously discussed, and various concepts regarding source orientation are shared in all preceding segments. This segment is an expansion of all that is previously shared. When we are done, we should have an expanded fundamental awareness of source orientation involving source balance, and another tip regarding source orientation, which is also source nature orientation. There are a few places at which some may want to pause the video to increase the viewing time of certain slides. Remember that this sharing or disclosure uses bridge words and bridge concepts. In this disclosure and consideration, what is balance? Balance is from Latin bi meaning two and lanx meaning scale pan. Here is an illustration of a balance. Such a balance is a two-scale pan device used to determine equal weight of two things involving like force. Accordingly, and in context of this sharing, there is this meaning regarding balance. Balance, the state or quality of being wherein there is the effective equality of two things involving the same or like force or effect. Also, there's a verb use involving affecting the same state or quality. For the sake of simplicity, this meaning is used in a fundamental consideration and does not deny the greater scope of truth of source nature regarding balancing complexity. A practical example of such balance involving complexity is image or picture balance regarding either analog or digital video, for example, picture quality of a TV, where the many qualities involved are balanced such that there is effective equality between original image and the image presented on the screen. Any state of being involves all qualities of that state of being, including all processes, effects, and other qualities thereof. The process of orienting to or with our source essence and source nature involves source balance. Source balance, the state or quality of being of source and source nature, wherein or whereof there is the effective equality of two things involving the same or like force or effect. Also, there's the verb use involving affecting such state or quality. While, in a manner of thinking and speaking, there are various usable notions of balance involving balancing light and dark, source balance is not a balance of light and dark. Yet it creates experiential and progressional effects involving light and dark, while affecting a subsequent, following after, type of balance in the sense of stability in our hybrid experience. Source consciousness knows that light, that which unveils, discloses, or exposes, and dark, that which veils, closes, or hides, are or have unlike and unequal forces and unlike and unequal effects. Light does not equal dark. They do not and cannot balance. Balance requires like forces or effects, including directional quality and magnitude, amount. Light and dark do not satisfy that requirement. With light and dark on the scale pans, the balance would ever be tilted and ever indicate effective inequality, that is, imbalance. No balance. So, in connection with the notion of balancing light and dark involved with progression, the concept of buoyancy is a closer fit where, in consideration, light has a positive buoyancy, upward or floating force or effect, and dark has a negative buoyancy, downward or sinking force or effect, such that when the positive, upward, and negative, downward, forces or effects are combined and produce a sum of zero, there is neutral buoyancy. In this consideration, 50 units of upward lifting or positive force or effect, consider light force or effect or lightness force or effect, plus 50 units of downward lowering or negative force or effect, consider dark force or effect or heaviness force or effect, affects neutral buoyancy. Neutral buoyancy affects neither ascent or ascension, nor descent or descension. that is, neutral buoyancy affects no or zero upward or downward movement, motion, or progression. When the upward, lifting, or positive force or effect of light is any amount greater than the downward, lowering, or negative force or effect of dark, there is only rising or ascension, upward movement, motion, or progression. When the downward, lowering, or negative force or effect of dark is any amount greater than the upward, lifting, or positive force or effect of light, there is only lowering or descension, downward movement, motion, or progression. Because of their respective forces or effects, light progression is upward and dark progression is downward. Source consciousness knows that there is no source coloration, no source dark or source darkness. How can that be? There is nothing of source that is dark regarding source. Dark meaning that which hides, conceals, veils, closes, or clouds. In other words, nothing of source conceals anything of source from source. Source balance involves an effectively equal response of our created thing device or organism, including cosmic spirit, soul, or body, such that the input from our source essence, including source light and no dark, produces an effectively equal output, action, or manifestation of source nature and affects source progression involving ascent or ascension, and not the descension, false ascension, of false light that is actually dark. Here's a simple block diagram, schematic, involving a device or interface with its input and output. Regarding source balance, the output should be an effective equivalent of the input, such that essentially and effectively source nature in equals source nature out, including source light in equals source light out, source truth in equals source truth out, and source love in equals source love out, etc. Like this. We have source love in and source love out. And this illustration adds a balance overlay. Output is an effective equivalent of input such that there is effective equality, which is balance. Remember, color is from Latin colos, meaning dark, colored, meaning darkened, and coloration, meaning dark or darkened state of being, including all processes, effects, and other qualities thereof. Here is an illustration of lack of balance. Here we have the block diagram illustration showing lack of balance, where output is not an effective equivalent of input. At the input, we have source love. At the output, instead of source love, we have cosmos love. The interface has incurred and accumulated internal coloration. At the same time, there are ongoing external cosmos coloration influences, and in the process of experience involving coloration of the device or interface, there's coloration occurring. There are coloration effects occurring, such that instead of source love being at the output, cosmos love or coloration love is at the output. Cosmos love is darkened love, disnatured love, while source love is one with source light and is not dark or darkened. Due to coloration, including distortions, biases, or obstructions incurred by the cosmic spirit, soul, and body, including the heart, the output or manifestation does not effectively equal the input, even if we have no physical body and are stationed in operating in the so-called higher and spiritual planes of the cosmos. Beings in those planes are yet affected by some degree of coloration until optimal source balance is effected. Again, here is an illustration of a fundamental distinction or difference between source and cosmos, including source nature and cosmos nature. Notice the distinction or difference regarding light and coloration. With that in mind, here is an illustration of our device or interface in the form of a heart with coloration, including distortions, biases, and obstructions. This is an illustration of lack of source orientation and source balance. We have shown here internal coloration and those external cosmos coloration influences which are combined to create coloration in the experience process, such that even though source essence and source nature are at the input, what we find at the output is of cosmos nature and its orientation and coloration. Within the device, there is or are mind and consciousness, programming and processes, perceptions, thinking and intellect, reasoning or logic, understanding, beliefs, delusions, etc., that occur under the power of coloration, dark or darkened state of being. Source orientation actively engages our source essence and source nature in a process of removing or clearing cosmos nature coloration, including distortions, biases, and obstructions, thereby affecting source balance, which is the principal, source, and principal, primary and preeminent or sovereign, balance state of being and balance process. Such clearing does not omit other parts of our experiential device or organism, including our head, spirit, and soul. The dynamics of the practically unlimited variables and possibilities within cosmos experience require an ongoing source nature equalization or balance process, unless we do not choose or create the experience of source orientation, perhaps because we are greatly enjoying the illusions, delusions, and other things of dark, untruth, and cosmic intoxication. Source wisdom is needed. Source wisdom, use of source consciousness and other qualities of source nature in pure and complete accord with all qualities of source nature. Such use also affects use of the cosmos. Here is a brief view of the process of source balance, of source orientation. Pause the video where desired or needed. So here we have the illustration of lack of source orientation and balance. At some point along the experiential way, we may come into an awareness of choice for source orientation and source balance. With that awareness, we may prefer source orientation and source balance over cosmos nature orientation, and we may affect a qualified choice made complete, thereby engaging source orientation and source balance, and progress in our ongoing source orientation and source balance process into optimized source orientation and source balance. The choice and activation or engagement of source orientation affect a type of purification involved in source balance regarding spirit, soul, and body, and increasing manifestation of our source nature while we are in our hybrid experience. In this, we experience what we may call a quickening effect, which brings into apparent life our source nature. This is a matter of source progression. The clearing or purification involved in source orientation and source balance maximizes source flow and manifestation or output in our hybrid experience and into the cosmos via our oneness connection with others and our actions or doings, thereby more greatly and apparently affecting the source progression of the entire cosmos, including all cosmoi and universes thereof. There is nothing of our cosmos experience that our source essence, including source nature, cannot handle with its already existing and not in need of development, source mastery, source love, source light, source truth, source knowing, source wisdom, and source strength or source power. In this, the illusion that we lack source mastery fades away, and we know that our source mastery precedes the cosmos and our cosmos experience. Who would deny that source, including our source essence, lacked mastery before manifestation of the masterfully created cosmos? And clearing the cosmos coloration in the process of source orientation involving source balance and its affected and subsequent experiential balance, in the sense of stability, within source progression maximizes the effective flow and manifestation of source in our hybrid experience. In the process of our source orientation and source balance, and among many things of source light, we may discover source light and know source knowing of source consciousness, how of source wisdom, source sovereignty, and source power we may uncreate or delete a tornado, or restore or recreate an organ or planet, or alter the speed and or direction of the wind, or make a certain email, whatever, secure to the extent of our use regarding source purpose, and that regardless of the provider or others having or having access to the encryption or decryption code, or do any of the great variety of source overrides in accord with source nature, or do any of the great variety of source resets in accord with source nature, etc. In the dialect of my Alabama redneck background, ain't it great? Ain't source amazing? Part 2. Another tip regarding source orientation. Remember and use our awareness regarding source nature, source orientation, and source balance. We have considered and should be aware of some fundamentals regarding source orientation involving source balance, and another tip regarding source orientation. This segment, F2S4, has been regarding source orientation and source balance. Next segment F3S1, is an expansion of source orientation and discloses a practical key to affecting our source orientation. Multiple and complete viewings of these segments will aid more complete comprehension. Email any questions or comments to scu.nicemail@gmail.com. Thank you all very much for the positive responses. Please share this with your social circle and support this communication with a like and subscribe. This Tim Pledger, the source and author, is solely and completely responsible regarding this presentation, a message and gift of disclosure, and you, the hearer or viewer, are solely and completely responsible regarding what you do or do not do with it and the effects that you so create.